But I'm hopeful that the ship will be recovered maybe this year, but certainly I'd say in the first half of next year.
Catching the upper stage of Starship using Mechazilla has always been one of the biggest challenges SpaceX needs to nail, and do it soon. Elon Musk once promised we'd see a jaw-dropping demo by the end of this year to prove that both stages of Starship can be fully reused. However, with recent issues plaguing Starship's progress, Musk has had no choice but to push that timeline back. Let's break it down in today's episode of Alpha Tech. On May 14th, about 2 weeks before Starship Flight 9, Elon Musk confidently shared one of SpaceX's next big goals, catching the upper stage of Starship using the launch tower. He said, "Later this year, if fate smiles upon SpaceX, the ship will be caught by the tower, just like the booster." And yes, for anyone following the Starship program, this is one of the most anticipated moments of the year. It's not just for show, it's a crucial step towards Starship's original vision, a fully reusable spacecraft capable of launching Starlink satellites, moving cargo across Earth, or landing crews on the Moon and Mars. So far, the booster, or Super Heavy, has already been caught 3 times by Mechazilla, including back-to-back successful catches during Flights 7 and 8. That's a strong sign of growing stability and confidence in the system. But unfortunately, the same can't yet be said for the upper stage, the Starship itself. The new Block 2 version has proven to be far from ready. With multiple failures and explosive outcomes, it seems that fate hasn't smiled on SpaceX, at least not yet. Ship 35 exploded during Flight 9 due to a propellant leak and loss of pressure in the main tank. And shortly after, Ship 36 was also lost in a ground test at Massey, following a composite overwrapped pressure vessel COPV failure. This string of setbacks has clearly thrown off several major milestones that SpaceX had hoped to reach in 2025. In a recent interview at X Takeover 2025, Elon Musk shared that he's optimistic about recovering a Starship booster sometime this year. But if not, then most likely within the first half of next year. That suggests there's still a small chance SpaceX could stick to its original plan, catching Starship with the launch tower arms by the end of this year. But honestly, it felt more like Musk was trying to reassure everyone. Because looking at where things stand now, a first demonstration sometime next year seems far more realistic. So why the delay? Well, if we zoom out and look at the bigger picture at Starbase, it actually starts to make a lot more sense. Firstly, as we all know, in order to catch the upper stage of Starship using Mechazilla, the ship must first survive the extreme conditions of space, especially during suborbital flights for now, and orbital flights in the future. We're talking about temperatures reaching 1,400 degrees Celsius during re-entry, wild pressure changes above 100 kilometers, and intense aerodynamic forces. To make it through, Starship needs a fully functional heat shield with around 18,000 individual tiles and those signature flaps that help control orientation and guide the ship precisely back toward the tower arms. But the current Block 2 version simply hasn't proven durable enough. In Flight 7, the upper stage suffered a propellant leak, lost pressure, started tumbling, and exploded. Then in Flight 8, it failed again, this time over the Atlantic, due to an engine control issue with the Raptors. And most recently in Flight 9, another leak in the main tank caused the ship to lose control entirely, fail to deploy its payload, and end in yet another explosion. Even Ship 36, which wasn't part of a flight, but rather a ground test on June 18th, exploded due to a failure in the COPV, the composite overwrapped pressure vessel. That incident raised even more concerns about material durability and system integration in Block 2. All of this points to a single conclusion. Block 2's heat shield, pressure systems, and Raptor engine reliability just aren't stable enough yet to handle the brutal demands of re-entry, let alone pull off a precise catch with Mechazilla. That's why the task of attempting this historic catch has now been passed on to the next version, Block 3. If everything goes smoothly with Flight 10 and Flight 11, the first Block 3 vehicle, Ship 39 paired with Booster 18, could debut as early as the second half of October this year. But just to be clear, early flights of a new version like this are usually focused on testing reliability, identifying flaws, and rolling out patches, not on risky stunts like catching a Starship mid-air. So realistically, the catch attempt is now being pushed into 2026. Secondly, yes, the Starship upper stage will eventually be caught by the giant chopsticks on the launch tower. But that's almost certainly going to happen at Launchpad B, not the current pad. Over the past few months, SpaceX has been working quickly at orbital Launchpad 2. The tower's mechanical arms were completed back in February, and the tower itself has already gone through multiple load tests using massive water bags. At the base of the pad, the staging area under the tower now features 4 embed plates, likely for a future static fire test stand, suggesting that SpaceX may eventually transport ships directly to this pad after static fire testing. If all goes according to plan, Pad 2 could become operational by the end of this year. And based on various statements from SpaceX team members, including Elon Musk and Kathy Lueders back in late 2024, the long-term plan has always been clear. Use Pad 1 to catch the Super Heavy booster, and use Pad 2 to catch the Starship upper stage. If SpaceX tried to catch the ship using Tower A in its current configuration, it'd be like trying to parallel park in a spot that's way too tight. Something's bound to get scratched. The catching mechanism might bump into parts it was never designed to touch, possibly damaging the fragile heat shield tiles. And even worse, the full weight of Starship pressing down on the edge of the catch arms could actually damage the very infrastructure meant to hold it in place. This is also why the chopsticks on Pad 2 have slightly narrower guide rails, adjusted to better match the smaller size and shape of the Starship, unlike the wider setup for the booster. However, as we discussed earlier, those plans seem to have stalled. With Pad B still not fully online, any attempts to catch Starship, if they're happening at all, would have to take place at Pad A. So far, there's no confirmation that SpaceX has shifted the upper stage catch plan to Pad A, and previous test attempts there haven't been successful either. So for now, the original plan to catch Starship at Pad B still stands. But delays in both Starship development and Pad B construction make it increasingly likely that Elon Musk will have to push the timeline into next year. Thirdly, even if the infrastructure and vehicle itself are stable, catching Starship with those giant chopstick arms is a whole different level of complexity. Its shape, mass distribution, and flight profile make it way harder than catching a booster. It's like trying to catch a flying brick falling from space with perfect precision. And to be honest, this method carries some serious risk. Things could go wrong on both ends, the vehicle and Mechazilla. If Starship isn't perfectly aligned with the chopsticks, whether due to a guidance glitch, sensor error, or heat-induced warping of catch points, Mechazilla might miss. And if that happens, it could be a really bad day at Starbase. We're talking about potential explosions, shockwaves, flying debris, and damage to the launch pad infrastructure, possibly even the tower itself. That's why they need more time. Time to fine-tune the autonomous flight software, recalibrate Mechazilla's movement, and maximize the chances of a clean, safe catch. So, what do you think? Will SpaceX pull off the first Starship catch this year, or will it have to wait until next year? Drop your prediction in the comments and let's see who gets it right. Overall, SpaceX may not attempt to catch right after Flight 10, but they're clearly gearing up for it. The chopsticks are being upgraded, construction is accelerating, and every move points to one goal, making catch capability flight ready soon. But what if they actually succeed in catching Starship for the very first time? That would shatter decades of rocket history. From NASA's golden era with the Apollo missions to today's advanced rocketry, space agencies have come up with all sorts of clever ways to bring crewed spacecraft, or upper stages, safely back home. Take the Apollo missions, for example. The crew capsule splashed down in the ocean using parachutes, and that traditional method is still being used today. Just look at SpaceX's Dragon. It follows the same concept, only with modern upgrades. When it comes to landing on solid ground, Soyuz and Boeing's Starliner are prime examples. These capsules are designed to touch down gently using parachutes and retro rockets to soften the impact. And who could forget one of the most unique landings of all time? The Space Shuttle. That thing glided onto a runway like a regular airplane. A totally different experience. And now, Sierra Space is bringing that idea back with Dream Chaser, their small space plane that also lands on a runway. On the flip side, if the upper stage wasn't reusable, like the SIVB stage of the Saturn V during Apollo, NASA had a few clever tricks. Sometimes they pushed it into solar orbit. Other times, they deliberately crashed it into the moon. Yes, seriously. In 1969, they slammed one into the lunar surface just to study moonquakes. It also helped reduce orbital junk. But all of these methods, from parachutes to runway landings to planned crashes, still relied on passive recovery or disposal. SpaceX, on the other hand, is attempting something entirely different. That's not just about saving money. It also helps protect the environment, speeds up turnaround time, and slashes launch costs to levels we've never seen before, potentially under $10 million per launch, compared to the hundreds of millions NASA spends on traditional systems like SLS and Orion. And there's more. Mechazilla allows SpaceX to catch the upper stage of Starship directly on the launch tower. No need for landing legs like the ones on the Starship HLS version. That cuts down the vehicle's weight and improves reusability. Once caught, Starship can be quickly inspected, refueled, and prepped for another flight, potentially launching hundreds of times during a single launch window that lasts just 2 weeks. SpaceX's current goal? To cut the turnaround time from 1 month down to a week, or even just 2 to 3 days. Of course, that long-term Mars vision is still quite far off. Realistically, it might take SpaceX another 10 or even 20 years to get there. So, let's talk about something a bit closer to home. One of the most anticipated milestones coming up is orbital refueling, a crucial step for long-duration missions to the Moon and Mars. It was originally targeted for the end of this year, but it'll likely slip into early next year. Elon Musk mentioned this in a recent interview.
A big technology challenge after being able to achieve full reuse of the ship is orbital refilling.
In short, a successful Mechazilla catch could give SpaceX the confidence and operational readiness it needs to take on something as complex as docking and transferring fuel in orbit. So, a slight delay here and there won't seriously affect Starship's overall development timeline. Recently, an internal source revealed that SpaceX won't be attempting a tower catch for Super Heavy Booster 16 during Starship Flight 10 later this month. Instead, the booster will perform a soft splashdown with a high risk of exploding on impact in the Gulf, similar to what was originally planned for Booster 14, which flew for the second time in Flight 9. Now, that might sound expensive, and it kind of goes against the company's core philosophy of optimizing costs. Because unlike Booster 14, which was flown again to test and prove the concept of reusability, Booster 16 is a completely brand new vehicle. Its estimated production cost? Around $63 million. And nearly half of that comes from the 33 Raptor engines alone, by far the most valuable part of the rocket. With a brand new booster in hand, SpaceX could have easily gone for another dramatic tower catch with Mechazilla, especially since they've already pulled it off twice in a row during Flights 7 and 8. So here's the big question. If SpaceX is willing to sacrifice an entirely new vehicle, what kind of data are they hoping to get in return? Well, to answer that, we need to look at the bigger picture. For any company, the early stages of testing are extremely expensive, and sometimes the data they get doesn't quite match the money they've poured in. But that's the price of progress. Spending tens of millions of dollars just to gain a small amount of experience, even if it only improves the rocket by 1%, is often worth it, because spaceflight has never been cheap. What really matters is efficiency, and pushing it higher with every flight. And that philosophy seems to be exactly what's behind SpaceX's latest decision. First, they've already mastered the tower catch technique, and they've done everything they can to reduce the risks. Doing it again wouldn't provide much new data, especially now that they're shifting focus to Starship Block 3. So sacrificing a Block 2 vehicle to unlock insights they haven't gained before, that's a smart move. Second, and more importantly, is the goal SpaceX originally wanted to achieve in Flight 9, but didn't. Let's rewind a bit. In Flight 9, SpaceX planned for Booster 14 to land using a steeper angle of attack. A higher angle of attack slows down descent, meaning the booster needs less fuel for the landing burn, something that could significantly improve efficiency in future missions. By testing how the booster handles aerodynamic forces at those higher angles, engineers hope to fine-tune flight control systems and optimize overall vehicle performance. That was the plan. But reality had other ideas. As it approached its designated splashdown area in the Gulf, Super Heavy relit 12 of its 13 center and mid-ring Raptor engines for landing. But contact was lost shortly after the burn began, when the booster experienced a rapid unscheduled disassembly just 6 minutes after liftoff, cutting short the very first reflight of a Super Heavy. So, in the end, the data SpaceX needed never came. Which brings us to Booster 16. Because it's a brand new booster, SpaceX is clearly taking this chance to try again, to recreate that critical test under extreme aerodynamic conditions. This time, with a high-angle approach that slows the vehicle down, they'll be watching closely to measure how fuel lines hold up under stress, how the Raptor 3 engines behave, and how the Block 3 booster design can be improved. And then there's a third reason. SpaceX may be quietly exploring the possibility of landing Super Heavy using landing legs as a backup to the launch tower. Right now, the only official landing method for the booster is via Mechazilla's arms. A soft splashdown like this could provide valuable data on how the booster's structure holds up under impact, even without legs. As B-16 touches down in the Gulf of Mexico, onboard sensors will record impact forces, vibrations, and mechanical stress as the vehicle hits the water. That data can help engineers better understand how the booster behaves during contact with a surface, useful whether it's water, concrete, or a landing pad. But relying on a single system carries risk. The launch tower itself is an extremely complex and expensive piece of infrastructure, worth hundreds of millions of dollars. If something goes wrong during a catch attempt, such as a misalignment or chopstick failure, it could disrupt SpaceX's entire launch schedule. That's why having a backup landing method, like legs for ground or drone ship recovery, would add critical redundancy to the system. In short, these advancements will ultimately make booster catches more reliable, reduce risks, and improve reusability overall. So, even though B-16 won't be recovered, it still plays a key role in pushing the Starship program forward. Its data will help pave the way for the next generation of vehicles and recovery systems. And on a bigger scale, the decision not to attempt a catch with B-16 may also signal SpaceX's growing focus on the long-awaited Block 3 era. So, stay tuned, big things are coming. And if you're just as hyped for Flight 10 as we are, type 555 in the comments below. Now, let me tell you about the good news coming out of Starbase. First off, just yesterday morning, we spotted Booster 16 fitted with the hot staging ring and placed on a transport stand. It rolled out of Mega Bay 1 and was moved to the Rocket Garden, where it'll stay until preparations for the next launch begin. Part of this move was also to make room for some maintenance and upgrades inside MB1. Overall, it's a solid sign that Starship Flight 10 is coming soon. But the next update is the one that really gets us excited. Why? Because according to the latest notice from LNM 25342, the U.S. Maritime Advisory, a series of launch operations has officially been scheduled near Boca Chica, Texas. Specifically, the launch window is open for 7 consecutive days, from August 16th to the 22nd, each day starting at 23:30 and closing around 1:34 the next morning. So what does that mean? It means SpaceX is ready. They're locking in the timeline for either final tests or possibly even the Flight 10 launch itself. This is the clearest signal yet that the next Starship test flight is just around the corner, and it could lift off as early as August 16th. Meanwhile, there was a hiccup with one of Ship 37's Raptor vacuum engines, which forced SpaceX to perform an overnight swap on August 5th. Now, they're reinstalling the ring wall and the adapters QD at the OLM to prep for a repeat of the static fire test, hopefully within this week. If things go smoothly, SpaceX may file for launch approval as early as this weekend or early next week. And since the FAA typically responds about 2 weeks before launch, we're entering a critical window. So after nearly 3 months of waiting, the next Starship is finally gearing up for its journey to the skies. And this time, all eyes will be on Boca Chica. Now stay tuned, and don't forget to subscribe to Alpha Tech. We'll be here with the latest updates, right as they happen. Maybe we can feel like everything is moving a bit slower than usual, but there's a reason for that. Starship is a one-of-a-kind, incredibly powerful rocket, something the world has never seen before. Many contracts have already been signed for Starship, but the most important of them all is NASA's Artemis 3 mission, the one that's meant to return humans to the moon. That mission is currently scheduled for launch in mid-2027, just over 2 years away. This historic effort depends on the flawless integration of several advanced systems. the Space Launch System, the Orion spacecraft, SpaceX's Human Landing System, next-gen lunar spacesuits, and a robust in-space refueling plan. Each part comes with its own challenges and deadlines, but NASA and its partners are staying the course, determined to write the next chapter in human space exploration. At the center of it all is SpaceX's Starship HLS, a moon-optimized version of the fully reusable Starship, now being built and tested at Boca Chica, Texas. It's the vehicle that will carry astronauts from lunar orbit down to the surface and bring them back, a mission-critical role that can't afford to fail. To calm concerns about the schedule, Administrator Duffy recently shared that he spoke directly with SpaceX President Gwynne Shotwell and received a personal guarantee. Starship HLS will be ready on time for Artemis 3. But Starship is only part of the equation. Artemis 3 also depends on another critical piece of hardware, the lunar spacesuits. Axiom Space, tasked with developing them, is reportedly making very, very good progress. According to Catherine Kerner-Glaze, these suits must withstand the moon's harsh environment and enable astronauts to safely and efficiently explore its rugged terrain. The coordination between HLS and the lunar suits will ultimately determine whether this mission can deliver on its promise of scientific discovery and a sustained human presence on the moon. Back to NASA just yesterday, astronaut Barry "Butch" Wilmore officially retired after 25 years of service. It's a bittersweet farewell for many of his colleagues, especially Sunita Williams, who spent 9 unexpected months stuck with him aboard the ISS after last year's Starliner mishap. Over the course of his career, which began in 2000, Wilmore flew on 4 different spacecraft and logged a total of 464 days in space. He also completed 5 spacewalks, spending more than 32 hours working outside the spacecraft. In a statement released on August 6th, Steve Kerner, acting director of NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, said, "Butch's commitment to NASA's mission and his dedication to human space exploration have truly been an inspiration to us all." NASA's statement didn't mention what Wilmore plans to do next, but honestly, it wouldn't be a surprise if he stays connected to space exploration in some way. After all, once a spacefarer, always a spacefarer. Just one day earlier, during a press conference titled "Breaking the U.S. Drone Monopoly," held by the U.S. Department of Transportation on August 5th. Yes, the same department led by Sean Duffy, the acting NASA administrator, dropped a bombshell. Duffy publicly called for the United States to deploy a nuclear reactor on the moon by 2030, framing it as a critical step in the new lunar space race. When pressed by reporters about this bold proposal, he responded, "We're in a race to the moon, a race with China, and if we want to build a base up there, we need power." He's referring to a highly ambitious plan to land a 100-kilowatt nuclear reactor on the moon by the end of this decade. That target date also happens to align with the expected retirement of the International Space Station, another major shift in focus. To put that into perspective, a 100-kilowatt reactor would generate about as much electricity as the average American household uses in 3.5 days. Not much on Earth, but a game-changer on the moon. And this kind of project, it's absolutely essential if SpaceX ever wants to build its rumored Alpha Moon base. Why? Because the moon spins so slowly that parts of its surface can be plunged into 2 weeks of total darkness. That makes solar power almost useless for any permanent human outpost. Most lunar rovers can't even survive a single lunar night. Duffy didn't stop there. He even turned a critical eye toward the Artemis program, the very mission he's responsible for. Everyone knew what Apollo was. It was bold. It was clear. We said, we're going to the moon, and we did. Now with Artemis, we say we're going back. But what does that really mean to people? We need to make it mean something. We need to make the world care. The countdown has begun. All signs suggest that Starship Flight 10, the flight we've all been waiting for, is gearing up for liftoff in early August. Just a few days ago, the Federal Communications Commission gave us an early glimpse at a possible launch window for Starship Flight 10, pointing to around August 4th. Normally, filings like these don't get much attention, since SpaceX can always change the schedule due to weather, technical issues, or additional approvals from agencies like the FAA. FAA filings are usually more reliable, but recently, the FCC has proven surprisingly accurate. And this time, it lines up perfectly with something Elon Musk himself said. On July 14th, he replied to a fan-made Starship video, launching again in 3 weeks. Based on those two clues, it's pretty clear that the launch could happen in the first week of August, maybe just a few days after the FCC's original estimate. Personally, I'm placing my bet on August 6th. What about you? Drop your prediction in the comments, and let's see who gets it right. If everything stays on track, Flight 10 will follow just over 2 months after Flight 9. It's not SpaceX's fastest turnaround, but it's impressive despite the Ship 36 static fire explosion setback. Without it, they might have broken their record. Still, the pace reflects SpaceX's drive to maximize 25 FAA-approved launches this year and recover from engine and separation issues. This mission could be a turning point, with improved engine reliability and booster recovery. With a stabilizing schedule and steady test progress, Starship is set to achieve a historic milestone, potentially key to Mars goals, a significant SpaceX might not yet fully grasp. But to truly understand why this flight matters, we need to look at the path that led us here, because it hasn't been smooth sailing. Flight 7 ended in disaster after a fire broke out in the engine section, causing a loss of thrust and the complete destruction of the vehicle. Flight 8 suffered a similar fate. Another fire in the aft section led to a total engine failure, cutting the mission short. Then came Flight 9. It flew higher than any previous attempt, but things went sideways during re-entry. The vehicle lost attitude control and disintegrated before it could reach the ocean. And if that wasn't enough, the ship originally assigned to Flight 10, Ship 36, was lost in a devastating explosion on June 18, 2025, during pre-static fire testing. A failure in the nitrogen pressurization system, COPV, was to blame. That's why Flight 10 isn't just another test. Ship 37 now carries the heavy burden of proving that Starship Block 2 is not fundamentally flawed, that the design itself is sound. It represents the culmination of hard-learned lessons from past failures, and the engineers are betting on this vehicle to validate every fix, every patch, every improvement they've made. This is more than a launch, it's a reckoning, a chance to show that SpaceX can not only recover, but come back stronger. But that's not all. If successful, Ship 37 and Flight 10 won't just prove that Starship Block 2 works, it will also ignite the next chapter of Elon Musk's most profitable space venture, Starlink. Today, Starlink already serves over 6 million users across more than 100 countries, generating an estimated $10 billion in annual revenue by 2025. And SpaceX wants to take it much further. This mission will include the deployment of simulated Starlink payloads, a critical first step toward transitioning satellite launches from Falcon 9 to Starship. Currently, Falcon 9 can carry about 21 to 29 Starlink 5, 2 mini satellites per mission, totaling around 17.5 tons and delivering about 3 terabits per second of bandwidth. It's efficient, but it's reaching its limit. Starship, by comparison, is a beast. With a payload capacity of 100 to 150 tons, it could deploy hundreds of full-scale Starlink 5, 3 satellites in a single launch, delivering up to 60 terabits per second. This massive boost in throughput will not only accelerate SpaceX's plan to scale the Starlink network to 40,000 V3 satellites by 2026, but also slash launch costs and dramatically improve coverage and performance from remote villages to crowded cities. But Musk is thinking even bigger. He envisions a next-generation version of Starlink, one capable of delivering ultra-high speed, low-latency connectivity, not just on Earth, but in orbit around Mars. The goal? A fully functional Martian satellite constellation, capable of linking back to Earth and supporting early human exploration, even before the first boots touch Martian soil, possibly by 2030 and beyond. Ship 37's success could be the spark that lights the fuse. So that's what Ship 37 brings to the table. But what about Booster 16? In Flight 10, Booster 16 plays a core role in accelerating SpaceX's push toward full reusability. And if everything goes according to plan, we'll witness one of the most thrilling moments in modern rocketry. A precision landing onto Mechazilla for the 4th time in history, a feat no other company has ever accomplished. This flight aims to collect data on sub-meter landing accuracy, within zero point 0.5 meters and pave the way toward turnaround times of under 1 hour. That's not just a performance goal, it's a necessity. Because for Mars missions, SpaceX plans to launch hundreds of Starships in rapid succession, and even the smallest margin of error could be catastrophic. Now, while Super Heavy has come a long way, challenges remain, like occasional engine reignition failures during boostback and landing burns. Reusing B-16 helps SpaceX cut production costs significantly, a critical factor in a program that's expected to cost anywhere from $2 to $10 billion. It also speeds up the test cadence, pushing toward the ambitious goal of 25 Starship launches in 2025. According to Musk, a single moon mission using Starship could require up to 7 tanker launches to refuel the vehicle in orbit, and boosters like B-16 will be essential in making that happen. But to support such an ambitious cadence, Booster 16 itself needs to overcome a few persistent issues carried over from the Block 2 design. Take Flight 9, for example. During the May test flight, Super Heavy detonated around T plus 6 minutes and 20 seconds, shortly after initiating its landing burn. The Raptor engines failed to fully reignite in time to control the descent toward the Gulf of Mexico. The likely cause? SpaceX was testing new aerodynamic profiles, including a revised angle of attack to optimize re-entry and landing efficiency. But those adjustments unintentionally disrupted propellant flow through critical plumbing lines. With fuel delivery compromised, the vehicle became uncontrollable, and the flight termination system was triggered. Flight 10 and Booster 16 will serve as a proving ground to validate the fixes. If it works, it'll show that SpaceX is closing in on true rapid reusability at scale. And beyond that, Booster 16 could help drive launch costs down to just $100 per kilogram, a staggering drop from $147,000 per kilogram in 1981, or even Falcon 9's current cost of $2,300 per kilogram. That kind of breakthrough doesn't just improve access to space, it transforms the entire industry. Most importantly, it brings us one step closer to Starship Block 3, the version designed to realize Elon Musk's ultimate goal, a rocket built to take us to Mars. Recently, SpaceX offered new glimpses of this upgraded booster, revealing major structural and design changes that reflect everything they've learned so far. Block 3 is on the horizon, and Booster 16 is lighting the way. So, how exactly is SpaceX preparing for Flight 10? And what gives Elon Musk the confidence to say it's happening so soon? First, let's take a look at the status of Ship 37. It was selected to replace Ship 36 after that unexpected incident, and so far, it has completed its cryogenic pressure test. However, its static fire test at Pad A is still pending, as SpaceX is finalizing modifications to the BQD and the propellant transfer lines on the OLM. Both systems are essential for proper fuel flow and connection integrity during testing and launch. If everything goes smoothly, the static fire could happen within the next 2 weeks. Next up is Super Heavy, Booster 16. This booster has already completed 2 major milestones, a cryogenic test and a full-duration static fire. Right now, it's sitting inside the megabay where teams are carrying out final checkouts and installations. One especially important task ahead is the installation of the flight termination system, a critical component needed to obtain launch approval. SpaceX also needs to mount the hot staging ring. That massive component is currently stored at the nearby Star Factory, and it's possible that SpaceX isn't just storing it there. They might be working on upgrades we haven't seen yet. With just 3 weeks left, SpaceX still has enough time to complete these remaining tasks and continue monitoring B-16 systems closely. And all signs point to this flight being a resounding success. If history is any guide, there's every reason to believe Flight 10 will succeed, because it follows a pattern we've seen before, right from SpaceX's very beginning. The company's history is steeped in failure, close calls, and sheer perseverance. Back in the early days of Falcon 1, SpaceX suffered 3 consecutive launch failures between 2006 and 2008. After the third failure, they were nearly out of money. In a 2012 interview, Elon Musk revealed that after Flight 3, SpaceX had just enough left for one last attempt, about $5 million. And he later shared on X that he was personally close to bankruptcy, borrowing money from friends just to pay rent. One of SpaceX's top engineers at the time, John Edwards, said something that lifted Elon and the entire company back to their feet. Never give up. After Falcon 1 Flight 3, we learned the hard way that the darkest night is right before dawn. Chin up. Keep pushing. We'll get there. And they did. That final shot, Flight 4, succeeded. And it didn't just save SpaceX. It secured a $1.6 billion contract from NASA, laying the foundation for everything that came after, and eventually turning Elon Musk into the richest person on Earth. This time, the stakes are different, but the drive is the same. Musk now has the resources to take Starship further than ever before, without worrying about how to pay for the next launch. Elon Musk posted something that quickly caught fire online. Starship booster recovered from sea, like the ruins of a long-dead civilization, he wrote, along with a haunting image of Super Heavy's mangled, rust-covered tail, pulled up after 8 long months beneath the ocean. That's right. It's been underwater ever since November 19th, 2024, when the booster performed a controlled splashdown during Starship Flight 6. More impressively, the Enlace MX Noticias team also snapped photos during transport. From these images, it's easy to see just how brutal the ocean has been. The booster's stainless steel structure is torn open, revealing the clustered COPVs at the center. These long cylindrical tanks remain intact, but are now caked in grime, rust, and seabed debris, as if they'd been resting down there for a century. Internal tubing and support frames are visibly warped or broken, likely from the force of the explosion and impact. But what really stands out is the tail section. The engine skirt is still intact, not completely shredded like what we saw with Booster 11. We'll talk more about that part in just a moment. In another photo, this pile of scrap metal was carefully secured using heavy-duty chains and a crane. Then, a massive blue tarp was wrapped around the engine section, probably to keep damaged parts from falling off during transport. So, we don't have a clear view of the engines, but judging by the visible structure, it's pretty clear they're heavily rusted and badly damaged. All in all, nothing here looks remotely reusable. Still, props to SpaceX for pulling this off. Drop a 13 in the comments to welcome it back home. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a moment of SpaceX's incredible journey. So, to understand why B-13 ended up in such a battered state, let's rewind to the day it met the Gulf of America. After successfully carrying Ship 31 to its intended altitude and completing a clean hot staging separation, Booster 13 executed a boost-back burn to begin its return to Earth. But unlike Booster 12 during Flight 5, which attempted to land back at the launch tower using Mechazilla's catch arms, Booster 13 was programmed to perform a soft splashdown in the Gulf of America instead. Why? Because during descent, automated health checks detected an issue with critical tower hardware. Specifically, the system couldn't establish a reliable connection with the booster. And when there's any doubt, SpaceX always prioritizes safety. So the decision was made to switch to a backup plan, a water landing. And they did, until the booster violently exploded just moments later. Since then, it had been lying silently on the ocean floor, untouched until just recently. On July 19, 2025, just this past Saturday, the massive recovery ship LB Jill finally made it to the site and managed to pull Booster 13 up from the seafloor. What came back wasn't a full booster, but just the tail section, still housing all 33 Raptor engines. And as for its condition, well, we've just talked about that. Mangled, rusted, and barely recognizable. It turns out, SpaceX had arranged for this ship a few weeks ago. LB Jill departed the port of Brownsville on July 13th, heading south into the Gulf of America, geographically closer to the Mexican side, and anchored about 11.5 nautical miles offshore. That also happens to be where Booster 13 drifted and eventually sank. Fortunately, even after the explosion, the remaining wreck, still weighing dozens of tons, settled in shallow waters, usually no deeper than 150 feet. It stayed right where it fell, like a sunken pirate ship frozen in time. So, for SpaceX, locating it wasn't the hard part. The impressive part was that they actually managed to bring it back. Part of that success came from LB Jill itself. The ship was equipped with sonar, an acoustic detection system used to scan the seafloor, pinpoint the exact location of Booster 13's remains, and assess its condition, whether it was lying flat, buried in sediment, or partially broken apart. After that, divers or ROVs could be deployed to inspect the wreck, attach cables or lifting hooks to solid anchor points, and prepare it for recovery. A quick note about the ship itself. LB Jill is owned by Secor Marine Holdings, Inc., a major offshore marine transport company based in Houston, Texas. They specialize in supporting offshore operations like oil and gas, wind farms, and, in this case, salvage missions. The ship is 56.39 meters long, 41.15 meters wide, and has a gross tonnage of 1,526 tons. It can carry up to 130 people. Most notably, it's equipped with 4 massive legs, each over 100 meters tall, allowing it to jack itself up above the waterline and operate stably in depths up to 83.8 meters, perfect for the shallow waters of the Gulf of America. All right, back to the point. Why did they wait until now to recover it? And what's the purpose behind bringing it back up? As I mentioned, it took SpaceX 8 months to even begin the recovery. It wasn't because they had trouble locating the booster or finding the right ship or salvage crew. More likely, it was because the company was fully focused on the next test flights, especially the development of Starship Block 2. Flight 7 in January marked the very first test of that new version, and all eyes were on pushing forward. SpaceX probably spent time reviewing data from Flight 6 and other missions to decide whether recovering Booster 13 was even worth it. At the time, it may not have seemed urgent, especially when compared to missions that promised more valuable technical data. Another possibility is that the LB Jill, the recovery ship SpaceX chartered from SEACOR Marine Holdings, Inc., may have simply been busy. These vessels often support offshore oil rigs or wind projects, so SpaceX may have had to wait for a free slot in its schedule. Now, after the explosion of Ship 36 at the Massey site, the pace of flight activity has temporarily slowed down, giving SpaceX a window to catch up on unfinished tasks. So they chose this moment to finally bring up Booster 13, and perhaps part of the motivation was also environmental, to clean up what was left behind. Another key point that shouldn't be overlooked, especially when it comes to environmental concerns, is that SpaceX is now facing legal trouble from Mexico after the aftermath of Flight 9. On June 25, 2025, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum publicly announced that her government is considering legal action against SpaceX over contamination caused by the explosion. She stated that Mexico is conducting a full environmental assessment of the impact on the state of Tamaulipas and is also reviewing possible violations of international law as part of preparations for necessary lawsuits. So it's unclear whether the recent recovery of the booster is purely technical or also a move to improve SpaceX's legal standing and environmental image. But at the same time, it's worth pointing out that recovering the booster is actually a very necessary move. First, from a technical perspective, the tail section of Booster 13, which houses the Raptor engines and other critical components, provides valuable real-world data on how the vehicle holds up in extreme conditions, like being submerged in corrosive salt water for over 8 months. SpaceX can now assess the durability of materials like stainless steel, insulation layers, and more. They can also examine the condition of the Raptor engines after long-term water exposure, which could lead to improvements in design and reusability. Second, it helps reduce legal risks. Booster 13 drifted into Mexican waters after splashdown, so its recovery required coordination with Mexico's maritime authorities and compliance with international regulations, including the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. By retrieving the booster, SpaceX minimizes the chances of future legal disputes tied to cross-border environmental contamination. So really, just by recovering this one booster, SpaceX stands to gain a ton of benefits. And this isn't even the first time they've done it. This is actually their second booster recovery, the first one being about 10 months ago. SpaceX previously recovered the engine section of Booster 11 from the Starship Flight 4 test on June 6, 2024. That recovery happened in late September, about 3.5 months after the booster splashed down in the Gulf of America. They used a different vessel for that operation, the HOS Ridgewind, a 79.2-meter offshore support ship owned by Hornbeck Offshore Services, not the LB Jill, which was used for Booster 13. According to sources, the HOS Ridgeline was spotted operating near Booster 11's splashdown site, about 15 miles off the coast of Boca Chica, Texas, slightly farther out than the more recent recovery operation. The main goal was to recover the remaining Raptor engines, reportedly around 14, for performance analysis, damage assessment after months underwater, and data collection to improve future booster designs, especially in terms of reusability. Photos show several Raptors visibly damaged, with the engine ring partially cut to assist the recovery process. SpaceX carried out the operation quietly, with recovered debris covered by blue tarps on the deck of the ship. Compared to the recovery of Booster 13, carried out by LB Jill on July 19, 2025, there are a few key differences. Booster 11 was brought back about 3.5 months after splashdown, much quicker than the 8-month wait for Booster 13. That may be due to its closer location and the lack of legal complications. Booster 13 had drifted into Mexican waters, triggering international concerns. For the recovery, SpaceX used the HOS Ridgewind, a standard offshore support vessel, whereas Booster 13 required the LB Jill, a self-elevating lift boat equipped with a 500-ton crane, better suited for shallow water operations. Booster 13's recovery was partly driven by environmental concerns from the Mexican government after the June 18, 2025 explosion. In contrast, Booster 11's retrieval faced no such pressure. In terms of condition, Booster 11 was far more damaged, with only the engine section recovered, while reports suggest Booster 13's aft section remained mostly intact. This shows just how much Super Heavy's structure has improved since Flight 4. Both recovery efforts serve SpaceX's engineering and environmental goals, but in the case of Booster 13, legal factors also played a major role. Of course, in the future, we don't want our hardware coming back on a recovery ship. It needs to return in a much more impressive way, like landing straight into the arms of Mechazilla, standing tall on a drone ship, or even on a floating platform out in the ocean. And that goes not just for the booster, but for Starship too. But for now, the return of Booster 13 marks a major milestone for SpaceX's Starship this year. SpaceX is about to smash another record, not only by launching more rockets, but also by skyrocketing its valuation. According to sources familiar with the matter, the company is in talks to raise funds and sell insider shares in a deal that could push its valuation to a jaw-dropping $400 billion. That would make SpaceX the most valuable privately held company in U.S. history, surpassing its own previous record of $350 billion set during a share buyback in December. It would also put Elon Musk's space giant in the same league as ByteDance, the company behind TikTok, and AI powerhouse OpenAI. Founded in 2002, SpaceX's potential $400 billion valuation leaves legacy companies like Boeing, founded over a century ago, trailing far behind. Boeing, for example, is currently valued at around $229 billion less. While SpaceX is regularly sending NASA astronauts to the ISS, launching its ever-growing Starlink satellite network, and leading bold private orbital missions, Boeing's Starliner program continues to stumble. Repeated delays and public skepticism have weighed down Boeing's credibility in the space sector. The contrast couldn't be more stark. Just in the first half of 2025, SpaceX pulled off 81 launches. In second quarter alone, Falcon rockets were responsible for 45 missions, 57% of all global launches, and over 90% of the total payload mass sent into orbit. Among those was a massive milestone, the 500th launch of the Falcon rocket family, which coincided with the 15th anniversary of Falcon 9. May set a new monthly record with 16 launches, and on average, SpaceX has been launching 15 rockets a month in 2025. At this rate, the company is on track for 170 launches by the end of the year, a record pace. Even more impressive, the rocket has now completed 148 consecutive successful missions since its last failure in July 2024. No other rocket in history has come close to that level of consistent performance. This streak is a testament to the engineering maturity and operational excellence that SpaceX has achieved. To put this in perspective, in 2024, China launched a total of 68 rockets across all models, setting its own national record. Russia launched just 17 to 18 rockets across its Soyuz, Proton, and Angara lines, and those numbers include both successful and failed launches. Meanwhile, SpaceX's 148 success streak applies to just one rocket model, with every single mission a win. What's driving this unmatched reliability? Reusability. SpaceX has mastered the art of recovering, refurbishing, and reflying its rockets. Many Falcon 9 boosters have flown more than 20 times. One standout, Booster B-1067, completed its 28th mission in May and its 29th at the beginning of the third quarter. It's not just the boosters either. Falcon 9's fairings, which protect payloads during launch, are also reused extensively. One fairing half, serial number SN185, flew for the 30th time in May and has since reached at least 32 flights. Recovering and reusing the payload fairing is a key strategy SpaceX uses to cut costs and boost launch efficiency. Each fairing costs around $6 million to manufacture, so retrieving and refurbishing them for future missions significantly reduces overall launch expenses. When combined with the reuse of Falcon 9's first-stage boosters, this practice allows SpaceX to save tens of millions of dollars on every launch, making access to space more affordable and sustainable. Falcon 9's base launch price is about $69.75 million, a stark contrast to the $100 to $150 million price tag of ULA's Vulcan Centaur and the $350 to $450 million range for the Delta IV Heavy. Thanks to its high reliability, impressive payload capacity, and unbeatable cost efficiency, Falcon 9 has rapidly become the dominant force in the competitive commercial launch market. Then there's the insane turnaround speed. SpaceX is now averaging just days between launches, with the shortest interval ever clocking in at just 4 hours and 12 minutes. That's airline-level turnaround, but for orbital-class rockets. On Launchpad, SpaceX set new turnaround time records at SLC-40, 2 days, 8 hours, 31 minutes, 10 seconds, and Launch Complex 39A, 5 days, 6 hours, 20 minutes, 40 seconds, in the second quarter of 2025. This demonstrates the ability to perform near-record turnaround times multiple times. Bottom line, between its blistering launch pace, world-record reliability, and industry-defining reusability, SpaceX isn't just dominating the aerospace game, it's rewriting the rules. Anyway, if you loved this deep dive, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring the bell. We're aiming for 150,000 subscribers, and we need you to get there. Check out our other videos on Starship, Artemis, and more, and let's keep exploring the cosmos together. When we talk about Falcon, it's impossible not to mention its trusty partner, the Dragon spacecraft. This incredible vehicle comes in two versions, cargo and crew. Let's start with the cargo variant, which evolves from the original Dragon 1. Dragon 1 made history by completing 23 cargo missions to the International Space Station between 2010 and 2020. It became the first commercially built spacecraft to deliver cargo to the ISS, helping NASA reduce dependence on Russian supply ships and paving the way for commercial partnerships in spaceflight. Before it ever flew operational missions, Dragon underwent rigorous testing, over 700 Super Draco engine tests, nearly 100 parachute tests, and thousands of hours validating its software and hardware to ensure safety and reliability. Enter Cargo Dragon 2, which made its debut flight in December 2020 under NASA's Commercial Resupply Services 2 contract. This newer model replaced Dragon 1 and brought major upgrades, including better reusability, higher cargo capacity, and the game-changing ability to dock autonomously with the ISS. Unlike its predecessor, which needed the station's robotic arm for berthing, Cargo Dragon 2 handles docking on its own, freeing up astronauts' time and making the process smoother. Cargo Dragon 2 can carry more than 6,000 pounds, around 3 metric tons, of pressurized cargo, along with additional unpressurized payloads in its trunk. That makes it a powerhouse for delivering scientific experiments, station hardware, and essential supplies. What really sets it apart, though, is its ability to return significant amounts of cargo to Earth safely, including delicate experiments, biological samples, and critical hardware. In fact, Some missions have brought back thousands of pounds of cargo just hours after splashdown, enabling immediate scientific analysis. Take the CRS-22 mission, for example. Cargo Dragon 2 delivered a record 3.3 metric tons of supplies to the ISS and returned over 2 metric tons to Earth after just 36 days in orbit. That kind of performance proves just how essential the Dragon spacecraft has become in supporting science and sustainability in space. However, Crew Dragon steals much of the spotlight. As a specialized version of the Dragon 2 platform, Crew Dragon was built to carry astronauts into orbit or to the ISS. Standing 26.7 feet tall, it's equipped with 16 Draco thrusters, each delivering 90 pounds of thrust in the vacuum of space. Crew Dragon made headlines in November 2020 with the Crew 1 mission, where it successfully transported 4 astronauts to the ISS. This wasn't just a win for SpaceX, it was a milestone for the entire U.S. space program, marking the first crewed orbital launch from American soil since the end of the Space Shuttle era in 2011. Crew 1 went on to set a new record for the longest mission by a U.S. crewed spacecraft, spending more than 84 days in orbit, beating a record that had stood since 1974. The mission concluded with a rare nighttime splashdown in May 2021, something NASA astronauts hadn't experienced in over half a century. Technologically, Crew Dragon is a major leap forward. It docks autonomously with the ISS, no need for manual controls or robotic arms. Inside, astronauts interact with advanced touchscreen displays, enjoy modern life support systems, and are protected by emergency abort capabilities. It's the definition of a next-gen spacecraft. And it's not just cutting edge, it's cost-effective. A seat on Crew Dragon costs about $55 million, significantly cheaper than Boeing's Starliner or Russia's Soyuz, making it an appealing choice for both government and commercial spaceflight. SpaceX isn't stopping with ISS missions. They've been expanding Crew Dragon's role into private space travel, and the results are astonishing. Take Fram 2, launched on March 31, 2025. This groundbreaking mission was the first human spaceflight to enter a true polar orbit, flying directly over both the North and South Poles. The mission used the Resilience capsule, featuring a stunning cupola window in place of the docking port. This capsule has an impressive resume. It flew Crew 1, Inspiration 4, and Polaris Dawn. Fram 2's crew, not your typical astronauts. 4 civilians with unique backgrounds in cryptocurrency, filmmaking, robotics research, and polar exploration. They didn't just break barriers, they broke records. It also marked the first time a Crew Dragon splashed down off the California coast. Then came Axiom Mission 4, launched in June. It was the debut of a brand new Dragon capsule, C213, named Grace by the crew, a touching tribute to Dr. Ryland Grace, the protagonist in Project Hail Mary, by Andy Weir. And Grace set a payload record for Axiom missions, carrying more science than ever before. And don't forget Polaris Dawn, the ambitious mission that's pushing us closer to Mars. It sent the farthest female astronauts from Earth, and yes, it featured the first ever commercial spacewalk. Between Fram 2, Axiom 4, and Polaris Dawn, Crew Dragon is redefining what's possible in human spaceflight, government and private, Earth orbit, and beyond. So, what do you think? Are you as blown away by the milestones of Falcon and Dragon as I am? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your take. In the US, we have SpaceX, the biggest private space company, hands down. And even though they found success early on, SpaceX is still growing at a pace that's honestly hard to believe. But over in China, there's a company often seen as a kind of mini SpaceX. Same dream, same ambition, just on a smaller scale. And right now, it's considered the country's leading private space firm. It's Landspace. Landspace is now seen as one of the most promising space startups in China. What's even more fascinating, they're incredibly young, founded in June 2015 by 3 very different but undeniably talented men. Their story brings back memories of a young Elon Musk juggling everything himself inside a cramped warehouse in El Segundo, California, which was once the main office of SpaceX. Unlike Musk, who had to figure everything out on his own, the 3 engineers who founded Landspace were a bit more fortunate. They came together right in Beijing, more specifically in a district called Haidian. Now, For those who don't know, Haidian is basically China's version of Silicon Valley. It's the heart of innovation and technology in the country, and of course, the capital city itself. This area has become a hotbed for space startups in China, so naturally Landspace had a much smoother starting point compared to SpaceX's early warehouse days. To put things into perspective, just 3 years after being founded, Landspace successfully built and launched its very first rocket, the Zhuke-1. It was a solid-fueled launch vehicle. Unfortunately, its maiden flight ended in failure due to a RUD, a rapid unscheduled disassembly. But here's the thing. Despite the failure, Zhuke-1 was capable of carrying up to 300 kilograms to low Earth orbit. For a company that was only 3 years old at the time, that's seriously impressive. And if you compare that to SpaceX, it actually took them 4 years to get their first Falcon 1 off the ground in 2006. Of course, that's not to downplay SpaceX's achievement. Landspace had the advantage of launching more than a decade later, with access to lessons learned from decades of rocket development. But anyway, this episode isn't about the past. It's about a new milestone Landspace is chasing, partial reusability. Now, before we dive into that, let's set aside Zhuke-2 for a moment, their current active rocket, and shift our focus to Zhuke-3, a rocket that's often described as a smaller-scale clone of SpaceX's Falcon 9. Back in November 2023, the company's CEO, Roger Zhang, officially unveiled Zhuke-3. Strangely, the technical specs that were once available on Landspace's website have since been taken down, possibly because they're being updated. So what we're about to share are older specs, and some of them, especially payload numbers, might change. But let's not rush into the numbers just yet. There's something more exciting I want to talk about first, Landspace's most recent achievement. On June 20th, Landspace hit a major milestone. As part of their push toward the first orbital launch of Zhuke-3, the company successfully conducted a full-scale static fire test. Right at midnight Eastern Time, all 9 engines on the rocket's stainless steel first stage roared to life at Pad 2 inside the Dongfang Commercial Aerospace Innovation Test Site, located at the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center in northwestern China. These engines, the Tianka 12A, developed in-house by Landspace, run on liquid methane and liquid oxygen. One by one, they ignited and burned for a full 45 seconds, completing gimbal control tests and shutting down smoothly, exactly as planned. And judging by the smiling faces of Landspace's engineers and staff, it's clear the test didn't just meet expectations, it exceeded them. It was a moment that echoed another historic scene during the maiden flight of Falcon Heavy, when Elon Musk literally ran outside the building just to witness what he'd created with his own eyes. The rocket had done even better than he imagined, and the joy on his face said it all. In total, Zhuke-3 generated a massive 7,542 kilonewtons of thrust. Landspace called the test a huge step forward, laying the groundwork not just for Zhuke-3's debut flight, but also for China's broader ambitions in reusable launch technology. This kind of simultaneous multi-engine firing brings China one step closer to mastering rocket reusability, a key goal for the future of spaceflight. But let's be real, there are still big hurdles ahead, like actually reaching orbit, recovering the booster safely, and proving the rocket can fly again. Originally, Zhuke-3's first orbital flight was planned for Q3 this year, and it was expected to carry a prototype of the Haolong reusable cargo spacecraft. This spacecraft, developed by the Chengdu Aircraft Design Institute under AVIC, is part of a broader push to deliver affordable cargo missions to China's Tiangong space station. That said, Landspace hasn't announced any updated launch date in their latest statement. All right, now let's take a closer look at what makes this rocket's design so special, and why some say it could shake up the entire aerospace industry. Zhuke-3 is planned to be a 2-stage liquid-fueled rocket, powered by a methane and liquid oxygen mix, just like SpaceX's Starship. According to previously released data, it's expected to carry up to 21 tons to low Earth orbit in expendable mode, and around 18 tons when flown in a reusable configuration. The engines used are known as TQ-12A, and in the recent static fire test we just talked about, Landspace revealed that each engine produced about 85 tons of thrust, nearly identical to the performance of the Merlin engines on Falcon 9. And just like Falcon 9, Juki 3 will use 9 engines on its first stage. Now, when you look at the specs on paper, let's be honest, 95 out of 100 people would probably call this a Falcon 9 clone. But there are a few key advantages here, at least in theory. First, the rocket structure will be built from stainless steel, which could drastically cut production costs. Second, by using methane and liquid oxygen, the first stage could potentially enjoy a much longer lifespan. Methane burns cleaner than RP-1 kerosene, leaving behind less carbon residue inside the engines. RP-1 tends to create soot, which can clog and damage engine components, meaning more time, effort, and cost for post-flight maintenance. That said, it's worth noting, even using RP-1, SpaceX has already managed to fly booster B-1067 a record 29 times. So far, Juki 3 has already completed 2 key test flights. The first was a 100-meter hop, successfully carried out on January 19, 2024, and the second was a much more ambitious 10-kilometer flight, completed on September 11th, very similar to the early Starship tests like SN5 and SN8. Thanks to these flight tests, Landspace now has enough data to attempt a landing on its very first orbital launch, which could happen as early as later this year. If they pull it off, it would be a game changer. They'd be in a strong position to secure government contracts for launching satellites for China's Guowang constellation. This is China's answer to SpaceX's Starlink and Blue Origin's Project Kuiper, both of which are racing to dominate satellite internet. Right now, China is still relying on its traditional Long March rockets to send these satellites into orbit. But here's the thing. The exact number of satellites launched so far remains unclear. The Chinese government doesn't always disclose the details. Many missions are simply labeled as communication satellite launches. However, based on the payload capacity of rockets like Long March 8, analysts estimate that only a relatively small number of satellites have reached orbit so far. Long March 8, for example, has a payload capacity of just 5 to 7 tons and has been used quite frequently. And this is exactly why Landspace is racing against time to develop Juki 3. If the rocket truly delivers on its promises, it could lift over 18 tons to orbit in reusable mode, a massive leap forward. That kind of performance would make Landspace a top contender for national launch contracts, and could help China break the global dominance of Starlink in the satellite internet race. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's impressive, but is it really enough to threaten the entire aerospace industry? Fair point. But here's the thing, China isn't stopping there. China has made it crystal clear they're aiming to put astronauts on the moon before 2030, and because of that, they're investing heavily in the technologies needed to make that mission a reality. At exactly 12:30 a.m. Eastern Time on June 17th, deep in the Gobi Desert at the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center, China carried out a high-risk spaceflight test, and it was a total success. The China Manned Space Agency, CMSA, conducted what's known as a pad abort test, or a zero-altitude escape test. The test involved a spacecraft prototype called Mengzhou. Within seconds of ignition, its emergency escape system fired, instantly pulling the spacecraft away from the launch pad. The capsule then separated cleanly from the launch escape tower, deployed its parachutes flawlessly, and floated gently back down to the desert floor, cushioned by airbag systems and landing precisely where it was supposed to. Everything worked like clockwork, a clear sign that the system is ready to carry astronauts away from danger and bring them home safely if anything goes wrong on the launch pad. But let's take a moment to talk about the spacecraft itself, Mengzhou, or Dream Vessel. Mengzhou represents a major leap forward compared to China's current Shenzhou spacecraft. It's being developed in 2 distinct versions, one for low Earth orbit LEO missions, and another heavily modified version for crewed lunar missions. The LEO version is partially reusable and can carry up to 7 astronauts to the Tiangong space station, or fewer crew members along with up to 500 kilograms of cargo. Meanwhile, the lunar version, weighing in at 26 tons, will be capable of transporting 3 astronauts into lunar orbit. There, it will dock with a separate lunar lander that would have been launched ahead of time. What makes Mengzhou stand out is its fully autonomous abort and crew safety systems, a critical step toward reliable, long-duration deep space missions. Mengzhou is expected to become the main crewed vehicle for both space station operations and future moon missions as China's ambitions in space continue to grow. In the end, it's a clear reminder that the US and companies like SpaceX have long led the space innovation race. China is catching up fast, but they're still playing catch-up in a game the US started years ago. So, what do you think? Can China truly close the gap? Share your thoughts in the comments.